I've always had this, particularly after the first fire, and now it's being tested in a way that is profound. Mindset is reality. And so if you wake up and you decide it's a bad day, you're going to make it a bad day in spite of yourself and maybe be surprised if it turns out okay. I've definitely had moments of what they like to call toxic positivity. What I learned in also this trauma experience is it's okay to call something bad. And sometimes I lean into that when somebody's trying to make me feel better. And I'm like, no, this freaking sucks. It's terrible. And let's just be okay with that because it's not what you're experiencing or even so much how you feel about it in that moment, because emotions are very temporary and roller coastery. It's really more about what are you going to do with that information?
Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Sam Dever Podcast, episode 126. In this episode, I speak with Annemarie Penny. Annemarie is the founder and CEO of Dreamore, and we had a fantastic conversation this evening. I can't wait for you to check it out. To watch this episode, be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/@thesamdeverpodcast. To listen to this episode, be sure to follow us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Here's my conversation with Annemarie. Well, Annemarie Penny, welcome to the Sam Dever Podcast.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
I'm very happy you're here. It's good to see you. I know it's been a time.
Happy New Year. Actually, there's a lot of us, and feel free to join our little club that it's still actually the holiday season. So we have not yet celebrated New Year's because we've decided January needs a do-over. So come with me. Come to the dark side. Happy holidays.
I think a lot of people will, especially in LA, will agree to that.
It's my birth month, too. I celebrated a birthday in the middle of all of this, and it was fine. But very interesting when January 25th, we were going to have a big party at my house. We were going to dance. We were going to be crazy. And instead, we were filling out SBA disaster recovery loan applications and setting up our FEMA inspections. And the bottom line is still here, still loved. That's what keeps me going.
Yeah. So how you holding up with it all?
It's I like to make a joke. I'll give you the silly answer and then the serious answer. I mean, ask me again in 5 minutes. And is there context in this that I'm a double phoenix, that I lost my property just burned in the Palisades fire in early January this year. And then back in 2018, I lost the Malibu dream house in the Woolsey fire. And so, yeah, the trauma journey is definitely one that you wake up, you're feeling good. 5 minutes later, maybe you're crying in your pillow again. But I've always had this, particularly after the first fire, and now it's being tested in a way that is profound. Mindset is reality. And so if you wake up and you decide it's a bad day, you're going to make it a bad day in spite of yourself and maybe be surprised if it turns out okay. And so I've definitely had moments of what they like to call toxic positivity. What I learned in also this trauma experience is it's okay to call something bad. And sometimes I lean into that when somebody's trying to make me feel better. And I'm like, no, this freaking sucks. It's terrible. And let's just be okay with that because it's not what you're experiencing or even so much how you feel about it in that moment, because emotions are very temporary and roller coastery. It's really more about what are you going to do with that information? And so that's been everything that was already in process with my business and personal life. And yeah, this sucks. It's a bad January in a lot of ways. But on the other hand, it's a profound January because I'm seeing all of these ways that the city's coming together. Like, for all y'all that say that LA is vain and shallow and unkind and we don't want to know our neighbors, sure, I guess. But everything that we're seeing is just this outpouring of community support from multiple fires that have affected every socioeconomic level. It's not just rich people. It's not just poor people. It's not just white folks or BIPOC. It's hitting everybody, and not just people that actually lost in fire like I have again, but everybody in the city has been affected in some way because most of us could see it. Many of us were evacuated or under warning. And for a lot of people, it's even more trauma that there was a threat, because they were scared, and then they don't know why they were scared because they didn't lose anything. And it's like, no, no, it's the threat that is the trauma, not the loss. I just went on a long, long journey. It's what you do with it, and how you decide is your mindset is really what's going to affect your reality of it.
Well, and we were talking beforehand because you've already been through this before.
If at first you
Eh,
don't succeed.
But the fact that it happens to you again, and we were talking, it's terrible that you've had to go through this twice. But the second time, like you said, like I guess you knew what to expect somewhat. Or
I mean,
what's different about this one, maybe?
I'm trying to come up with universal, relatability here. Like, I have friends that, they've had more than one baby, and they're like, oh yeah, the second time you kind of know what happens. So, maybe I'm nobody's mother that I know of. So maybe that's a good example. Or moving. I mean, the first time that you move, or, there's just so many, you graduate from kindergarten, you're like, whoa, this is a big deal. And by the time you're done with high school and maybe even graduate college, you're like, yeah, I know. You put on the funny hat and then you go do other things. It's fine. So I'm not at all belittling the pain of this. This is a great and terrible experience for anybody to go through, whether it's their first time or their second or their third. I'm certainly not alone in multiple experiences. I've been talking to people that had, family in the Paradise Fire or other Woolsey victims. And I'm sure there's some people out there that would go, why do you even live in a place like this? It burns. Just go somewhere else. And these are all valid opinions. I am accepting if someone is angry about this or in denial or any other set of emotions. But you just got to take life as it comes. I'm healthy. There's a perspective. I have friends that died in COVID. My best friend died last year, and he was talking about Dreamore in the morning with me, had lunch with his wife, talked to his mom in England, and then had a heart attack and died an hour later. And you're like, well, there you go. That was your last day. So that also really got me even more focused on this concept that, treat every day like your last and don't be bitter about that. Just make sure that on some level it's a good day.
Yeah, you bring up a good point. I mean, it's terrible, obviously, to lose homes and material possessions, especially if it meant a lot to you. But if you're physically here, you're physically okay. I mean, you're still in the game. Like,
Yeah. I mean, that is an example of something that nobody's right or wrong in this, but it is a different experience. The first time, we went to the rubble, and there's a very special sculpture, a human machine that is bronze and metal and somehow managed to survive that terrible fire and was laying on top of the rubble. It was at my land and survived again. And so it's becoming this resilient story of, how could this thing, once again live through 100-mile-an-hour winds and 30-foot walls of flame and just be standing there resolute. But the first time I really was poking through, gosh, here's my fork, or, oh, here's a piece of my reading lamp by my bed. And I wanted to preserve as many of these physical things. And I think in that stage of my healing journey, it felt very, very important to have these physical items for the memories and just for feeling like, well, I didn't lose everything. See, I still have this rusty metal broken bit weird thing that I turned into a piece of art. And I love the art and I appreciate the memory. This time, though, I just finally was able to get out, from under the evacuation and go see the land last Saturday. And I'm looking around and just kind of didn't feel compelled to take anything. It's like, you know what? If the lesson here is to let go and get to the other side of this great release and still be okay after that and still feel motivated and still feel loved, like, you know what? We're all going to let it go in the end. And not to make this too dark and gothy, but it is actually a perspective on these terrible losses to recognize that they are a way of practicing other ways that we will lose as we continue to age and, eventually won't be here in this form. So yay, I'm getting better at it. And that actually feels really liberating.
Hmm. That's beautiful. I love how you said that. Like it's, um, nothing is permanent, right?
Nope.
And, maybe transitioning to your company Dreamore, it's like, it's beyond a physical place, right? Like if you could you tell us a little bit about Dreamore for those that aren't familiar?
Absolutely. Yes, let's talk about business and brand and all those fun
We don't
things.
have to.
Oh, we don't have to do anything. Are
I
you
will tell you
kidding?
this. I will tell you this. I did get a particular book to read to prepare for you tonight. This is before
Uh-huh.
all the fires happened. Secrets of Sand Hill Road.
Oh, interesting.
And I was flying great through it till they
Yeah.
started. Venture capital is complicated. Like it's not like this easy. Oh, here's $1 million. We get whatever percent. We're gonna sell it and all make it. It's like it's so.
You know,
You
I'm,
already
I'm
know all
just
this.
gonna, I'm just gonna nod and smile and breathe heavy. So, this is the sound of nodding and smiling in a microphone. Okay. So Dreamore is actually a newer name for a firm that I'd launched back in the 90s. And it is certainly informed by the fire experience that I shut down everything that following year and then decided to come back and, be a different version of the same thing. So originally we were Apex Direct Search. We were the first recruiting firm in Los Angeles to focus on .coms in the area. Back before that was really a thing. Now, there were a lot of companies that piled into that very quickly. So I'm not trying to say I was the only one for a long time, but I basically was already in recruiting with Fortune 500 and whatnot. And I looked around and I saw this very unique thing in Los Angeles happening. And yeah, we were kind of the redheaded stepchild of Sand Hill Road and the Bay Area and all of that was already going on. But yeah, back in the 90s, the LA tech scene was very influenced by the entertainment industry. So you had all of this media aspect that's very creative. And I just wanted to be in the room with entrepreneurs, creatives, and nerds because those were my people. And so I refocused the firm just so I had an excuse to have these really interesting conversations. And then, of course, the .com boom and all of that money, we did very well very quickly. And that was super exciting. So over the years, by the time it was all said and done, we were ranked very highly on the Forbes list for America's best professional recruiting firms. We built hundreds, if not thousands, of startups, taking them through IPO or acquisition, unicorn status. Granted, 90% of startups fail. So many of our clients you haven't heard of, and that's okay too. The relationships remain strong regardless. So Dreamore is that as well. We are recruiting an advisory firm for startups and middle market companies. And middle market, for people that might not be familiar, you've got your, enterprise and Fortune 500, really, really large companies. You've got startups, which could be anything from, one guy in a garage to, a venture capital backed larger company. But the middle market is anywhere from typically, maybe 50 to 200 or 500 million in revenue. And so it's kind of the middle child of business. A lot of companies want to do business with the startup side or the enterprise side. And we love the middle market. This is where also a lot of the unsexy exists. So if you see all of these distribution companies or plumbers and electricians and contractors and all these kind of companies are often family owned and have built up to a level that is very respectable. So anyway, that is our niche, and we solve problems that others can't solve as easily. So every business is made of people. No matter how much AI is doing what it's doing, whether it's a product or service, it's still people behind that. And so we are the people that can look at an organization or a team and better understand what are you trying to build overall and how is that informed by people. And so if you've got a search that has a bit of nuance to it and needs this depth of experience that we have and this vast depth of relationships to know almost everybody in this town and others, that's when you call us. Dreamore is also the real estate, because I've also always had a physical location that's been part of the brand. And that, if we can take a minute to just talk about relationships and community, it's been a 30-year journey for me. Oh God, that word journey. It's been 30 years delete that out. Journey is so overused now. We're not going on any trips. We're just sitting here in our minds. It's been a 30-year set of experiences that in the early days, the dot-com boom in LA was just like this little village, right? It was a bunch of people going, I don't know what this is, but it's cool. And then it got big, right? By the time, there was so much venture money and so many unicorns being created that it almost felt corporate all over again, which is what I had specifically left to go have this very community spirit, familial kind of relationship base. So then COVID happens. And all of a sudden, we're remote, we're distributed, we can be global because you can hire anybody, anywhere. And what I've been seeing, and this is where it comes back to this recent fire experience, we've been craving community on a level that I don't know we even quite realized. And then you have this opportunity to reinforce it. And everybody's just coming together like, oh my God, I need to feel connected. I need to feel like this means something. And if I'm on Zooms all day and I'm just, creating output, like, where's the soul? And so it's been interesting to have this 30-year journey. Yes, I said it again, that it all started out with this very community spirit kind of thing. And then we kind of lost our way a little bit, I think. And now it's coming back around, which is interesting when you think, oh, well, AI is doing so much that doesn't necessarily require the human touch. But I think that is the opportunity for us to lean even further into our humanity, because the AI doesn't have any feelings. It's not going to get PTSD from a fire, and it's not going to tell your stories. That's the stuff we get to do.
I was at an event the other night, and one of the speakers said, now's the time where we can actually focus on being human now.
Yes, exactly.
I'll give him credit. Michael Masucci said that. And
I love Michael.
he's brilliant. He's
Yeah.
absolutely brilliant.
Yeah.
And saying with events, all the events I go to, there's tons of people. So I agree with you completely. There is that craving for community. I think we get lost in our phones so much, but at the end of the day, I just think there's that inner, whatever it is, that we crave that face-to-face person connection.
100%. LA Tech Week started right after COVID, and last year's LA Tech Week was just the best ever. I don't know, it was like 600 and some events here and in the Silicon Valley. And, there were small ones, there were big ones. Dreamore actually closed out LA Tech Week on the 10 acres and had probably about 40 or 50 people up there just having nature time and a picnic. And it was a really nice come down from anything from these very, very large programmed events to Party Oktoberfest. But yeah, we were already seeing it, and it is useful to see how we're getting that positive feedback loop for community instead of just going, okay, I went to a party and now I just feel exhausted from that. We're seeing why community matters as we help each other.
Yeah. And by the way, LA Tech Week, because that was my first time getting exposed to some of that. It's like amazing, like how many parties there were. Like,
Yeah.
I thought I was going to some, like, oh, you didn't hear about this one that's over here. I'm like, what, when was this? And
Yep.
Oh man, you got to go to this one. And if you don't go to this one, this is where everyone's, I'm like, it was like 20 million of them. But
it almost felt like LA was being so LA because we're so known for FOMO that there's a party going at any point that we're missing out on, that it was the LA Tech Week FOMO big time. Yeah. But really, like, I have nothing but a love for everybody that produced the events and produces LA Tech Week. Katya and the rest of the group are just, they worked really hard to create something special for LA, and I can't wait till this year.
Yes, and I'm really great to have stumbled upon this community as well. Because the acting, arts, entertainment is what I started out here, but then as I discovered the startup tech scene out here, I'm like, what? There's a pretty strong presence here. Like, it's not just some little group. No, it's big.
It definitely got big. I mean, that's the thing. There's certain pockets that are known more for other things. There's a lot more software as a service up north, and certainly all the silicon and all that kind of thing. But we're still an entertainment town. And so that's where I'm also excited to see so much of us returning to our roots with content and generative AI and immersive and all of these other very, very creative mergers with technology.
And I want to get your take on that. But before I forget, I thought it was very interesting what you said about your company, how you guys focus on the middle. those middle companies? Because it seems to me that would be where a lot of the stability would be, right? Like, why do people want to jump either to the major thing or the startup?
That's a good question. And I'm trying to say it in a way that's kind because I almost just blurted out something because people have no imagination. We will tend to do what we see other people do. And I'll just throw out an example that is trying to be a supportive way of expressing this point. I was a nerdy, smart kid, right? And I taught myself to read when I was 3. So I'm reading the newspaper and the King James Bible because that was what was available at the time. And I can actually remember this. So nerdy, smart kids, by the time they're getting ready to go to college, I'm 14. And, so what are you going to do? And if technology and software engineering and AI and these kinds of professions were mainstreamed then, I am certain that's what I would have done. But at the time, it's like, well, do you want to be an electrical engineer or a doctor or a lawyer? And so I was pre-med with an art minor. So I'm still an artist at heart. And then I switched to business and broke my family's heart, and no regrets. But that's an example where we tend to do what we tend to do what we see. We tend to copy what we see. And so, there are very clear career paths for Fortune 500 or, accountants and lawyers and all this kind of thing. And then at the other extreme, maybe it's the people that don't fit in that box very well. And then they're going to go be a creator or found their own company or, definitely so much of this last boom cycle in technology, all of a sudden the nerds were the cool kids. And so everybody's going to go, be an engineer or a data scientist or these things that, with love, like a lot of us that were like that would get bullied. And now we're the cool kids. So it's going to be very interesting to see how it shakes out from a, sort of broad point of view. Like, are people going to be looking at, hey, there's no shame. Actually, I have a very, very dear friend and client that he is running technology for a company that does like plumbing supplies and toilets and all this kind of stuff, right? That's not sexy, but you know what? Everybody poops. And the fact that he has kids and needs the stability and it's interesting work and there's so many problems that they don't know how to solve that he knows how to solve with technology. So I wouldn't be surprised if we continue to see, that kind of movement. AI is going to continue to be part of it. But what if you can take this kind of hard tech and sophisticated technology and then apply it in these very practical solutions? Because we're dealing with stuff like, yeah, a lot of us in LA are homeless right now, and some people needed like food. When you get stripped down to those basics levels of, oh, that's right, I actually don't care what's on Netflix right now because I'm hungry. And you're not a person who was born into poverty. You just had circumstances that put you there. It's painful, but in my optimistic, healing motivated persona, I hope that people can take these terrible experiences and go, okay, well, then what are we going to do with this? And how do we restore some meaning and purpose in our activity and not just keep busy for busy's sake because, that's what everybody's telling us to do.
Yeah, no, that's very interesting. And I guess too, like when people think it's the startup, it's fresh, it's new, maybe it blows up to be this huge $1 billion startup where it sounds like the bread and butter's that middle ground, everyday stuff people don't think about. And you're right, like they're all going to need this technology too to run.
Everybody. I mean, it's not going away,
Yeah.
and it's still new. I mean, I cut my teeth on the early stage of the internet when we threw a bunch of HTML pages up, and most the internet was originally more for scholarship and sharing, that kind of academic information. The scholars weren't thinking, oh, someday we'll do TikTok all day. They just wanted to have a way to share credible information. And in this era of what feels like everything is misinformation, it's ironic that the birthplace of the internet was like hard science data and hard academic data to just like share this knowledge with each other in a more streamlined fashion. But I do want to give you a yes and on the founders versus corporate and all these kinds of themes. people with an entrepreneurial streak, there's just merit in, I want to go create something that I have an idea and then I can go do it. And so it's a little bit different from, there's a financing model, and that is definitely mainstreamed startups in terms of venture capital and private equity. But there are all these other ways to be founders and to start up your own company that don't necessarily have to subscribe to that model. And, so much of the entrepreneurial side of things is just, hey, there's a problem that nobody seems to be solving, so I want to take a stab at that. And regardless of the financial model of startups, ooh, I did that thing. Sorry, precious microphone. I did not mean to slap you. This is a safe space. I want
It was
to.
a very subtle.
Okay, it was actually meant as a hug, and I just did it incorrectly. So this is a very nonviolent organization. I love you, microphone. So going back to that, it was wanting to be a slight correction so that it wasn't misconstrued that I'm boxing these things in a certain way. As a serial founder and entrepreneur who deeply, deeply loves entrepreneurs and respects the journey, there's that word, that sometimes you're going to go start your own. Sometimes you don't have that luxury. Sometimes you got to go get a job and pay some bills and feed your family. And, it is what it is. But the spirit is always there.
As a founder entrepreneur, when you hear the GOB word, it's like a vampire getting hit. No!
Well, especially among artists. I mean,
Yeah.
that is a whole other conversation that could be a whole podcast in and of itself as a creative person. And then if you're earning money for what you are creating, and then that's somehow invalidating your art because now you're just being commercial and being capitalistic. It's like, oh God, no, everybody should be able to express themselves and earn a living. And there's no shame if you're getting paid better than you expected. I personally, with my artist soul, I came to California as a teenager with all of this like nerd smart to just be an artist and express. And then I'm very grateful to have stumbled into a career with excellent mentorship that has been able to generate to the level that I've been able to reinvest and do all of these other things. That's groovy. And there's no shame in that either. It's just you don't know what's going to happen. But if you're good at something and you get paid for it, right on. You deserve that.
Yeah. No, and I actually, I was listening to a couple other podcasts you had been on. I do research, but not like a ton of research. So I just have a little bit, but you said something very interesting on one of them. You said, he was talking about like what makes up a founder, like and how certain founders just, they go to work for companies and and they just can't do it. And it's not, and I think a lot of people may misconstrue that as, oh, you're lazy, or, oh, you just don't want to be responsible. But no, it's like an actual thing to be made up a certain way, right?
There are character traits. And yes, we have a science tool that is run through some very specific lenses based on a 14-year research study that was published in the last year. And based on Ocean, which are these 5 main kind of personality buckets. I won't go too far down on that because you don't want to hear how the sausage is made. You want to eat delicious pizza. So the pizza part is that what came out of this was very clearly that a founder or an entrepreneurial type is wired differently than an employee type. And that doesn't make anybody bad and wrong, because if there's anything that I ever want in my communication, it's like, I am not Little Miss Value Judgment. I don't think anything's bad or anything is good, even when I'm saying things like that fire was terrible. Because in the same sentence, I'm like, yes, and it's also been very powerful and transformative. And I'm grateful for this terrible thing that I'm sorry to put these pictures on the internet. So the founder qualities that we were able to assess, founders are unflappable. And I know this one, man, because I'm telling fire stories. Like, even when you're scared, because that's part of it. People don't realize that the most famous actors on stage are still scared. It's just that fear doesn't stop you. And in some ways, it can actually activate you. So that unflappability for a founder, on a harsher scale, you could call it delusional. Because, find me the artist or the creative or the founder is like, I'm going to make $1 billion. And it's like, sure you are, honey. You could do you. And sometimes they do, but usually not. But that's very foundery. Definitely active, because, if you're lazy, you're probably not going to go start something. Adventure seeking. And that curiosity is a big reason why I love being in, tech and tech related endeavors, because there's just always something new and it's changing and AI is coming at us so fast and it's evil, but it's amazing, but it's creative, but it's, it's all these things. And so having that adventurous spirit for a founder is crucial. And one of my clients was like, well, I don't jump out of airplanes. I'm not adventurous. Yeah, but you're intellectually curious, and that makes you adventurous. And then, yeah, attention seeking is one way we call it. So the fourth one, and it doesn't like, I'm actually an introvert. I know it doesn't look like it. So if you're willing to be on stage, even if you'd rather be at home with your Netflix, every founder needs to be okay with attention.
That was a great breakdown. That was awesome.
Good.
That's going on TikTok.
100%. Well, we have this founder success survey, 15 minutes. You can find out what your entrepreneurial scale is, and that can greatly inform the career path. If you keep going into jobs and like just feeling like it's not quite the best fit, that can inform. Or if you keep launching things and you're like, what am I quite doing wrong? Then it can be very informative to find a co-founder with traits that offset yours. So the introvert who has somebody who is like really excited to be on camera and go do all the business development stuff, perfect. That's a good co-founder fit.
I'm glad you brought that up, because I've been at enough events now where I meet someone, you're like, oh, what do you do? What do you do? And then I've had a couple particularly that say, I'm looking for my co-founder.
Yeah.
And at first, my co-founder, but you're the founder, right? And he's like, yeah, but I one person in particular is like, I'm looking for a CTO.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, okay. And then sure enough, I circled back. It was probably a couple months later. We ran in.
Mm-hmm.
He looks at, I found him.
Right on. Yeah.
But that person knew exactly what they wanted. And that is an important thing, because it's one thing to have the gumption and the ambition to launch something, but it's like, that's not enough. Like you guys, critical. But
there's a lot of math around, the ideal is actually, at least 3 co-founders. And you figure, oh gosh, the more bodies you put into this, the more it's going to be push me, pull you. But here's the thing. When it comes to a success outcome for a startup, and again, we're still talking about founder success and this data science tool that we have that's proprietary. So we can measure these qualities. We can also measure personality types, which can inform the kind of activities you want to do. So if somebody's an operator, their default is they're going to want to organize stuff. So you probably don't want that to be your CEO, but you would definitely want that to be like your CFO or your COO, right? Things are stressful. I'm going to make sure it's organized. And then, also just a single founder, how are you going to innovate? How are you actually going to get there when you're your own best echo chamber? So you're either going to be really hard on yourself and your imposter syndrome is going to cripple you, or it can be the other way, which is like, I can do no wrong. And there's nobody to tell you how wrong you are. So having at least 1 co-founder, but ideally 3. And it is actually the tension between the co-founders and the leadership that drives the innovation that statistically can predict a success outcome. And a success outcome is anything from an IPO to an acquisition, something that's actually measurable, not just like, hey, we did good. So yeah, it's interesting because I think a lot of times you want 1 co-founder and then it's scary to think that you want to bring more people into that mix. And it's also very easy to create environments that you think, oh, if we're in conflict, it's a toxic work culture. So we're going to make sure that we have a positive work culture where everybody is collaborating and agreeing with each other. And so somewhere in this part of the conversation is the more we can educate ourselves about healthy conflict. Because right now we're just talking about within a startup environment, right? And the corporate world, you need people agreeing with each other and a leader that's telling everybody what to do. That's a completely different scenario for success. But in startup culture, to the extent that you're banging heads a little bit and saying, no, I don't agree with you. This is my perspective. This is actually where it comes to why, diversity and inclusion is very charged here lately. But the spirit of it being that we come from different backgrounds with different perspectives. And that is going to create this healthy conflict to drive innovation, which leads to success. And we've mathed it. So now we have the AI tools to do that.
And if people want to do that through how do they do that? How do they take that assessment or?
Yeah, there's a tab on dreamore.io. So DREAMORE.io. And one of the tabs is founder success. So that landing page will take you right to what you need.
Awesome. That's an
Yeah.
incredible thing because that's something that's not talked about either. Like to be able to like actually find out what you may think what your who you are and what your strengths are, but something like that sounds like no, actually, if you take this energy and this ambition and throw it into this, you're going to be way more successful.
Here's the thing, and this all goes into core motivation and who we really are and how that informs how we are and what we do. So I'm going to try to let that sink in for a minute. Being in the people business and the recruiting business. So, what's the stereotype of what that job is? Okay, so you have a hiring need. Here's a job description. You have a resume. Okay, here's the things you did that you've listed on your resume. Now I'm going to match these activities and skills. And then I'm going to go, oh, you're qualified. Let's get you hired. I've been saying for at least 20 years, you can teach skills, you can't teach motivation. And somewhere in that intuition, and now with this founder success tool, what we've been able to data science and prove and predict is that core motivation ends up driving people's behaviors and activities. And if somebody is in a role where you're like, wow, they're just not really motivated, I can't get them to do, well, a lot of times it's either they're not very high on the entrepreneurial scale, so they're more of an employee personality, which doesn't make them bad and wrong. It just means even if they're in a co-founder by title, you need to be telling them what to do because that's just going to be better for the kind of person that they really are and their intrinsic motivation. They might get more motivated by structure and direction and praise as opposed to maybe another co-founder, or if you're somebody like me, it's like, don't tell me I'm good at what I do. I know I am. Just leave me alone and I'm going to go do it. Right. That's like so stereotypical of a founder. Like, I know what to do. So the other thing is that, there are times I don't want to devolve this into career counseling because that's not what this is about. But there are certain personality types that will inform what you're just inherently motivated to do. And then the trick is hacking that. So if you are inherently the sort of person that is the leader, that it wants to inspire the rest of the team, like one of my dear, dear friends, like he's so good at this. But if you task him with like, now you got to do all the stuff, like, no, that's just not, yeah, he's not the down in the details, do all the stuff guy. He's the like, let's get the team together and let's get everybody excited about it. And then I can map this all out. And then like, yeah, look, we did it. And so how powerful is that if that's the role that they're in? Because they're going to roll out of bed and do that for free in spite of themselves. But if they're in a different role that is not tying in closely to just who they are naturally at that core and how they're naturally motivated, it's going to be a rough fit. And where you see it is when you're under stress. And by the way, all startups are under stress all the time, right? But that's the other thing about this survey and this assessment is that it's digging into who you really are. But like we just went through a fire, right? And I already had this personal brand as it relates to Dreamore because I've been writing about it and post fire, the first fire, like that's been. So here we are with this other fire, and everybody's like, "Are you okay?" And I'm like, "Yeah," but quite genuinely, they're seeing the culmination of like, well, I was already this person, and now I got really, really, really tested, and so I'm being who I am, and that's kind of awesome, right? Because that's when you know.
Mm.
I'm not going to wake up tomorrow and suddenly just become this very angry, bitter person because it's just not who I am. And others might, and that's okay. It's when you know is when you get tested.
And that's true. You have the online proof of just resilience. Everyone that's
That's the
seen you
word.
post about the first time and then the second time, immediately they're, oh my gosh, this happened to you again.
Yeah, and I'm not the only one. So I
Right,
always
right,
like to
right.
balance it out. And it's not that your language is incorrect. It's just for the sake of being gracious. It doesn't feel kind to, the thousands of people and I don't know what the number is. I'm actually considering that I want to put out a bit of a bat signal of, who else has experienced multiple fires,
Sure.
and I would just love to have a community discussion about. So what's been your experience? How was it different this time than the other, or did it feel the same, or did it feel worse? There might be people that are, angry now and they weren't angry the first time. I don't know.
Well, and tying it into what we were talking earlier about community, I mean, that's a whole other community, right? Like
Yeah.
that's a whole community of people that have gone through something similar and probably are looking for other people to talk to about.
Yeah.
You know, whether it happened in the Palisades or like you guys have experienced the same thing.
Yeah, and up north too. I mean, you know, we've had
Everywhere.
fires all over the place. So
Yeah.
that's actually been a number of people that are approaching me that we're trying to figure out how to coordinate, because, you know, there's going to be a lot of rebuild energy, and, you know, everybody wants to do the right thing. I hope. There's a lot of talk about, you know, most people want to rebuild and not let this thing, you know, be a sign of defeat, but more like, no, this is home and it's what we love. So let's do this again. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see what all comes out of this energy that can ultimately be positive.
Yeah.
Um, just one example, because I have a lot of New Yorker friends, you know, post 9/11, like New York kind of went through this, you know, phase where there was just a lot of trauma. And then you saw after that the way that New York as a city perceived, you know, people perceive LA a certain way, and people were perceiving New York as being harsh and, you know, this kind of stuff. And then New York as a city came together in a level of community that a lot hadn't experienced before. And it was super positive. So I think that's going to be a version of what happens here.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I appreciate you sharing that and taking us through that journey. I was trying to.
It's the J word.
It is a good word.
Well, I don't know that it's a bad word. It's just, you know, these
It's
kids
used a
these
lot,
days.
yeah.
Yeah, somebody was like, you can't use that word anymore. I didn't realize I was using it a lot. Now every time I use it, I hear it. It's like, oh gosh, what is the number for too much? We need to math this. Is it 10 times a week? 10 times a month? It's 3 times in this podcast, so I'm getting nervous.
We probably used it enough. We may use it again here one more time, but I do want to talk to you about AI. But one question I do like back to the, and I think I can answer 2 of these questions, or 2 reasons. You've dealt with so many founders and startups and seen companies succeed and fail and all of that, maybe middle of the road. Besides having a great team and having a niche of something that people actually want and need. I learned that in 0 to 1 by Peter Thiel. It's like, do people actually want what you're creating? Like that took me back and made me think of some things. But what are the other characteristics or things that you've seen in some of these companies or founders maybe that led them to succeed? Is there anything else that stands out that you've seen?
You know, I'm going to say one key factor is a growth mindset. And a growth mindset is basically, you know, having the adaptability, being able to take the lessons and learn from it. In earlier stages of startup culture, it was all about the pivot. You know, you're going to pivot. And then sometimes like overusing the word journey, it's like, wow, I think you pivoted like 3 times this month. This feels a little pivoty to me. You need to figure this out. But somewhere in the adaptability, because we have more data science tools, because we have, I think, markets that are, you know, maybe reacting more quickly. So instead of this, you know, we're going to go down a path for 6 months and then go, oh, shoot, that didn't work, and then go down a different path. It's a lot, you know, more nimble in this adapting to, you know, the data that we can gather now and, you know, respond to much more quickly. The growth mindset is also a state of being. And I mean, it's not on our founder success scale, but founders are stubborn, right? It's like, I'm going to do this and I'm going to be the one. I guess that falls under the unflappable section. But there is something quite valuable in not having a fixed mindset and not being stubborn about, like, I don't like the word failure. It's the F word to me. And when I use it, it's not failure if it's learning. And so this was, for what it's worth, it's another thing that came out of the first fire, because I moved up to my land in a trailer to develop it. It was nothing that anybody would have expected, but I treated it like a startup. And I said, if you're going to be successful in this massive 10-acre development project in coastal California and also heal, then you got to be both feet in it. And that is going to be assigned to yourself, and importantly to everybody else that you ultimately want to come in with investment and other energy. that you mean it, because you just moved there in a trailer and that is not what you do. So I am learning things like, there's a well up there and I had to figure out generators and how to get water from the planet. And then sometimes the well wasn't working. And so I would cry and then I would go, well, pardon the pun, I'm thirsty and I'm dirty. So do you keep crying or do you figure this out? Or do you go to your neighbors and go, can I have some water? So these were that's why I made the comment earlier about, people that had to evacuate and all of these fires that are just fine. But then they were like, I don't have food, or, oh gosh, I forgot my toothbrush. And it does do certain things to your human brain to go, oh, wow, why was I really in a bad mood? Because that car cut me off on the freeway because right now I'm hungry.
Mm.
So that's where this came out with the failure thing and everything is learning, because I realized every time I was just way overwhelmed with these things that I'd never experienced and needed to learn for survival. And I was being really hard on myself. And I recognized, oh God, you just get tired and then your brain starts eating itself, is how I call it. It's just like, you're such a loser. It's like, whoa, I've never had these thoughts before. And so I'm like, wait a minute, you just did something dumb, or you did something dumb because you were tired. You didn't eat, like you should eat, these things, basic things. And so every time I would have something that was failure, I would say everything is learning. And I retrained my brain. So it's like, nope, everything is learning. What's the lesson? Just stop. What's the lesson? Okay, well, this is what you did and don't do that again. Okay, well, it's only failure if I keep doing that same thing over and over and I keep making that same mistake over and over. So, yes, that absolutely translates to anything in your business and personal journey. I mean, gosh, it translates to your personal relationships and your marriage. Like, are you going to keep saying that thing that annoys your partner? Like, why? You know what's going to happen. So, what are you getting out of that? And why do you keep failing in that very specific way that you could take the lesson and adapt? And then where does that take you? That might actually be the path you need to be on.
I think you got a book right here. It's like a nice concept. Like everything is learning. I
Everything
love
is
that.
learning.
I
Yeah.
love that.
And it became a mantra.
Yeah, and really, you only do quote unquote do fail if you stop trying. Like if you stop and you choose that, you're choosing that.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, it's just such a charged word. And I don't know that this is the way it is for everybody, because, the word failure is very popular in founder culture and all of that. And so, maybe they're not perceiving it as bad as but just however that was hitting my brain, I don't know, probably something from childhood, right? And, but I was the tightly wired kid that if I got a 97% on a test, I had failed.
Oh, you were that kid. Yeah,
I was that
I
kid.
knew those kids.
Oh my God.
I did terrible on that test.
Oh my God.
98%.
Yes. Yeah. I know it's terrible. I would be embarrassed to see myself now as a child and go, what the heck is wrong with you? You need to loosen up. This is ridiculous. So maybe it's that. So just there is no such thing as perfection. And if there were, it's boring anyway. It's like bad AI. Like everybody's face is a little crooked. Just embrace that. It's interesting. And so that was where it's like, I just can't use the word failure in anything I do. This is just too harsh.
I love it. And speaking of AI, now we get to this wonderful topic.
Wow.
I've been like a fly on the wall this past year, like listening to, there's people that are all in, give it to me, baby, like all of it. Some that are like, burn it to the ground, delete all. And then you got like the middle of the road. So I'm curious of your outlook, your take. What do you think about all this AI?
I got takes, and we'll try to compartmentalize the thoughts. In fact, if I had my open AI here handy, I would just say, I need 5 bullet points, because that's how I use it. I'm a good writer already, but that's my editor sometimes. And point well noted. So in no particular order, we'll go, but plot point number 1. I'm an OG.com internet sort of person. And we already told a story about the early days. Like we were putting HTML on a screen and going internet, because we didn't have the imagination to go, what is the internet really going to be capable of? It's capable of broadcasting this across the globe, and Zoom and finance. We can do all of our banking on the internet, and blockchain, and all these things. So it's accelerating, but we're still in many ways, at least with the mainstream, that we don't even really understand what AI is beyond like we can make art with weird hands and, some, music that sounds not great. And some, average quality writing. And I'm saying this to be silly, but everybody knows when ChatGPT first went out to the open market and somebody would ask it something and they would go, "Oh, that writing's horrible." It's like, yeah, it's learning and it's brand new and we haven't even imagined. So that's plot point number one. Here's the thing, sort of building off of that if we thought that the internet was just a bunch of HTML pages because we just didn't even have the imagination or the applications for what it has become. Imagine that AI is this, your best assistant ever that is going to take care of problems that you didn't even know existed. And maybe they don't exist because that assistant of yours, like that's their job, right? Is to not come to you with everything. And like we're one of our clients, we're hiring a chief of staff for them, right? So this is going to be the right hand person to the CEO, and the CEO is a visionary and the point person and the brand. But that chief of staff is going to be like, yeah, I'm going to do what you tell me to do up to a point, but then I'm also going to go take care of things that you don't even need to know they exist. And that's where AI is going. I have some other friends, I'll just name drop them, that Kendo. Hi, Kendo. Hi, everybody. And I had this great conversation with their chief product officer about right now we are humans trying to interact with technology and our little brains can't keep up. So we have all of these zaps and widgets and so many apps and so many tools, and we're paying so many, software as a service subscriptions. I can't even keep up. And then I got to do a thing and somebody needs to pay me. And now I need to download another thing that's got to integrate with another thing. And I still got to do it myself as a human, right? It's nuts. And so imagine that where this is going is all of that, like let the machines talk to the machines, because we're not doing a very good job trying to keep up. And by the way, your career is not trying to keep your inbox clear, you know? And this is what we've been in, this really clunky, miserable, cognitive overwhelm stage because the technology is advancing way faster than our brains will evolve. And guess what? They don't need to. Because we can tell our stories. We can go to dinner and relate to each other and smell each other and hug. And we can go out into nature and look at the sky and have a profound moment and plant a flower. Like AI is not going to be doing that. And if we train the robots how to do that, they're not going to feel anything around it. So that leads me to plot point 3, which is AI is AI, humans are humans. This is an opportunity to lean further into our humanity. And so when the AI is racist, it learned from us. When the AI has ethical issues, that is coming from the people. And then also, if we're afraid that AI is going to take our jobs, then, well, what do we want to do those jobs or do we want to do other things? And if AI is going to take your job, well, maybe like there's no gaslighters anymore because we have electricity, and that's just part of what happens. And so let's lean further into humanity. And plot point number 4 is relating to innovation. Like, so where does that go? Innovation and creation. If AI is doing all this stuff over here, and yeah, it's freaking scary. I'm not over here like Pollyanna going, yes, I'm going to sit on a flower and, drink champagne while the AI just basically does everything for me. I came out of corporate finance and I am so old that Microsoft Excel was brand new when I was in the finance department. And so it's awesome, right? But also they said, y'all are going to have like part-time jobs now because all this Excel technology is going to make your finance job really easy. And all we did was just level up our game and do more. We actually worked more and we printed more paper too. It's crazy. So now I'm just cynical anytime somebody says it's going to make it easy. It's a human condition. I don't know that we make things easy because we're humans.
That's an interesting point. I don't think I've heard anyone bring up yet. You're right. At first you think it's going to replace things, but maybe people will go, "Oh no, they can do even more now. So now we're going to expect you to have even more output." Because now you can use AI. You should be doing triple, quadruple, whatever industry.
So I'll wrap this up with a plot point 5, the unknown. We were in the industrialization era, And then we've been in the information era. And so what's interesting is this spillover. There's this residual of things that were part of our culture with industrialization, like the 9 to 5 job and the lunch break and, all these other things. If I had my open AI, I would be like, what are all the things from the industry? And then I would read that list off to you, but somebody else can do that. And there's probably 10 things about industrialization that I don't have in my brain because I don't have to. But in the information era, like we still have this ingrained in our culture, like, oh God, I should be working right now because it's work hours. But then also it's 24/7. So I'm going to stay up late and work then too. And all this residual stuff that doesn't make any sense. And yet it's been ingrained. So the unknown part to me is that, this isn't just going to go away. And I know that's scary. That's part of our human brains. We fear the unknown. That's just embrace that. Because like sometimes you just don't want to get on a plane to a country you've never been to because you're like, I've never been there. So recognizing that you're going to have that kind of fear, but then like, if the AI is going to go this way, well, then where are the humans going to go? Like, how is this all going to settle out? And we don't know. And if we think we know, we just don't. And so it does create an opportunity to try to take some power back and go, okay, well, then what do I want? Like, quite honestly, I have this 10 acres and we're working on other real estate stuff. And I grew up in the country and spent a lot of time with mindfulness, just like staring at nature. And it was so calm. And anytime I do that as an adult, I just shut the screens and I walk out. And there's a reason why the phrase touch grass exists, right? Because people are so like, you just go touch grass, calm down. So that's one opportunity. If, maybe we can be a little bit more conscious about our choices and not just keep on this rat race. So that was where I was going with this unknown part of it. It's like we carried these things over from industrialization and then just kept spinning and spinning and spinning more and more and more. And we didn't have to, but like we did. Because like the information stuff, like it could have been doing some things for us, but instead we just filled that with more. And so, I don't know. We having these things like cataclysmic fires and, maybe that breaks us in certain ways to go like, what does it all mean? And what do I actually want to do with my time? I don't know. Everybody's going to make that choice individually. But if this ends up breaking under its own weight because we have so much of a mental health crisis and so much cognitive overwhelm from the amount of information and screen time that our little human brains are trying to keep up with, maybe we go the other way. Maybe we go back to being more tribal and, growing even more vegetables. And at the rate eggs are going up in price, having even more chickens. I had chickens. Chickens are great. I want chickens again.
So you'd wake up and pick the eggs or collect them?
Oh, absolutely. The Malibu Dream House, we're right on PCH with the pool and the ocean. And we have the chickens near the pool with the ocean view. So the Malibu chickens were actually kind of well known in town.
Do you have goats too or just chickens?
That was on the list. It still is.
And that's at the same place, right? The Malibu
Different
Dream
place.
Oh, so different.
Yeah.
So the new land, this is not where the Malibu Dream home was.
Correct. I mean, this is just like the wacky, silly part of the story. There's the expression around, man makes plans and God laughs. So in 2018, a lot happened that year that was great and also terrible. I bought the land, bought the 10 acres, different location. And the whole idea was, okay, well, let's have a retirement plan. We built all these unicorns and companies and we built this 1.5 acre garden on this parcel. And, now let's level it up. He wanted a plane. I wanted land. And, by the way, I came to California with $200 and a bed to sleep in for a few weeks. So like all of this was hard work and relationships just to set the scene for, I'm grateful for, everything that's been created from, just being motivated and having valuable relationships along the way. But anyway, 2018, that happened. That's when we were on the Forbes list, Lifetime Achievement Award. All this stuff was going on. And then, the Woolsey fire happened in November that year. And it was like, and, we found out about it because it was on NBC News and the anchor was like pointing to Malibu fires and that was our house on fire. So couldn't even do that discreetly. Um, but that whole year had this wild roller coaster of high and low. And, it was a good plan, right? We'll just stay here and keep doing that. But the breaking of it, the cataclysm of it, um, was a lot of pain. And you're seeing me 5 or 6 years later having the benefit of that failure. Was it a failure? So just this is the thing. You don't know how strong you are until you get tested. You don't know who you really are or who your friends really are. And so all of that is with gratitude.
Yeah.
And it informs Dreamore. So yeah, we're still a version of what we were before. We very much leaned into being more about purpose-led companies, building products and services that are doing something good, or at least treating their people well and not just, blowing it up to make money. And that's the whole point of it. But, are we going to do something that is actually affecting, some change or wealth or health or positivity in some way? Definitely supporting women and diversity because we're a female diversity-led organization as well. So anybody who hasn't always had the same chance at things, we want to be able to, do what we can to, reinvest in our own community and help each other.
What's the I was going to ask what the recruiting end was like for talent, because obviously you're working with companies who are
Yeah.
looking for talent. So what's it like on that end of the spectrum, like dealing with people looking for jobs?
Well, we're not outplacement or anything like that. So, we are what they call it is a targeted search firm. So it's like executive search, except we do the same methodology at any level in the organization. And so that just means it's not a staffing model where we're advertising and just collecting a bunch of resumes and then shuffling it through on the volume level. There are functions that it makes sense to do that kind of search. So I'm in no way disrespecting, staffing and other kinds of recruiting firms. But the positioning that we have is very special because we're filling roles that, sometimes our clients aren't even quite sure what the title should be or what it should pay. So we're going to come in and say, okay, what are you doing and what do you need? And let's help you right size that. And then leveraging our very deep trusted relationships. And then also doing the targeted search, which is, what kind of companies have these kinds of people? And let's do direct outreach. We are bringing humanity back to hiring. And we implemented that when AI started to get real popular. It took me a minute to go, okay, well, how do we position ourselves that makes sense? Because we use AI, of course. We've always been known for innovation. There's a lot of recruiting AI that's just, it's kind of doesn't have the same soul. And I was also observing that with tech industry layoffs and entertainment industry strikes and other dynamics that have affected our city profoundly, people were being dehumanized in ways that just really got me in the feels. And I just didn't want to do that to anybody. I actually went into recruiting, changed careers because I had a bad headhunter. And for 6 weeks, I was in this job I hated. And every morning I woke up with a pit in my stomach. And so that's my origin story of being a recruiter. It's like, oh God, I would never do that to somebody else if I had the influence. And so bringing humanity back to hiring really means that we're going to use the tools as it makes sense, but not to the exclusion of being very focused on, who are you? What do you want? How do you feel about this? And how does that serve the client? So, we're not just going to make a placement, but we're going to build companies with people in a way that's sustainable.
Okay. It makes okay. Now and thank you for, tolerating my slow understanding of what you're doing, because now that makes sense. So a company, whatever company comes to you guys, like we know we need help, but we don't exactly know what type of help. So that's why
it's a spectrum. A lot of times the employer knows exactly what they need and we can validate that and say, yes, absolutely. And this is what it should pay. And this is where we can find them. It just depends on the employer. Because sometimes this is the other thing about, this is a job made of people in all directions. And so you might say, oh, I want a chief financial officer with some M&A background and I want to pay $100,000 and some benefits, and I wanted to be located in this unit, and I want them to have real estate background or whatever. So we go out to the market and we call all of our friends, and then we might have to go back to the client and say, okay, well, for everything that you needed, there's either, the salary's a little bit off, or you're not going to get this with that, or we might need to go out of market. And, so there's all these dynamics that we're going out and doing all of that thorough research and market validation so that an employer can make a good decision and not just make a decision in a vacuum. And my last point on that, we always think we're strategic as humans, but we're very reactive, right? Like we're reacting to what's in front of us. Even these questions, I'm reacting to the questions. So this happens so often in hiring and very much in how people pursue their next career move. If you're just going on to job postings and calling your friends, you're going to react to that and nothing more. And there's nothing wrong with you. That's not the whole puzzle. Hello, microphone. For executive firms do this all the time. We just do this lower down into the organization if that's a need. We're going to go cover the market and go, okay, well, here's the whole universe of what's possible. And then here's your best choices out of that universe. So now you get to go, all right, well, here's somebody who's a little less senior and, very affordable. Here's somebody who's very experienced, but very expensive. And here's somebody in the middle. And now I can decide, what do I think is best for my company? Like having a personal shopper. Here's a blue suit, here's a black suit, here's a gray suit. Now you have choices.
I was going to see if there's any correlations to matchmaking, like dating for what you're doing.
So much respect to matchmakers.
The ones that do what you're talking about, not just like the ones that actually like really do research.
It's the same. Yeah.
Yeah, that's very interesting. I see a lot of value in what it is. Obviously, it has value, but like I never really. Now that you're breaking it down, like the intricacies of it, and it makes a lot of sense because you're saving these companies a lot of time, probably, and a lot of money in the long run.
Yes,
from them searching for things that they thought they needed that they really didn't need, or talent that doesn't exist. Because from maybe the other types of recruiting, like a common thing that always comes up, like people. Like the requirements that some of these companies were looking for. I mean, you need a doctorate in this, an MBA in that. You need 15 years of this experience. It was just insane, the amount. Like it was like 10 different jobs within one job. And it's I wonder how many companies, like they're just saying, we just want this and we're just not going to settle till we get it. Well, that may not even exist.
Turnover is very expensive. Having a search open for a long time is very expensive. Interviewing. No hiring manager is interviewing for a living unless they're the head of HR, right? So, all of that time that is taken away from your actual function, all of that's very expensive. And, we don't try to explain, companies that might have a different way of hiring. We're not trying to tell them that their way is wrong and our way is better. The employers that understand the value of what we do, that's a good fit because they're either busy and, like, everybody makes choices. Like I do my own gardening because I love to garden, but most people hire a gardener. It's, neither choice is wrong. It's just a choice.
What do you like to plant?
Everything. Well, right now on, if I can be brutal, on my burned out land, we're just throwing wildflower seeds. It's going to be so beautiful in the spring because that is what happens.
We got the rain. That was great.
Even before the rain, there was already green that was coming back. The resilience of nature is just, it's beautiful, man. It makes me want to cry and that is also part of the experience of these terrible things where you go up there and it looked post-apocalyptic. There's been a lot of conversation around for the impact in our communities between the Eaton Fire and the Palisades Fire in particular. It is the equivalent of we got bombed. And that's what that looks like. And I've lived in the Middle East. I know what that looks like. And it's
You lived in the Middle East?
Yes, I lived in Israel when I was a teenager.
Really? Wow.
Yes.
How long were you there for?
I was there when I was 12 and then also 14 and 15. So
Arkansas originally?
Arkansas, I know.
That's quite the...
As you do. Yeah, everybody does that. Are you kidding?
Arkansas to Israel?
Yeah, no. There's a bullet train. It just goes right through the ocean, straight to Israel. Everybody does it. I got lucky. My mom had a job opportunity, and I was accepted into university when I was 14. And I still remember this conversation because she had this offer, and she goes, "Oh, well, I don't want you to waste a year." And I'm running basic math, like, I'm going to graduate when I'm 18. I'm barely legal. And I'm like, Mom, I'm not going to waste a year of my life living in the Middle East where I've never lived to have all these experiences. And so we did it, and the university just pushed it back another year. And so it was no big deal. Super grateful for that experience. I think every parent, if you can, please take your child before they are an adult to a foreign country for at least 3 months, not on vacation, just go and live somewhere else. Israel was a much younger country at the time. And so it was the first time I'd met New Yorkers. I mean, there was so much diversity. Russians, they had airlifted the Ethiopian Jews, during that time. So I'm a little girl from Arkansas that I had never seen, anything like that. Um, and just also to have that experience of this group of people being rescued to another country because they were in danger, Russians, everything. And so by the time you fast forward and I get into, the recruiting business, and it is all about inclusion and diversity and all of these other topics, I'm very proud that even the first time that I launched my company and built out my team, just on an instinct level, it's like, oh yeah, you need to have all different kinds of people so we can all relate to each other differently and have different perspectives. I got that from being in the Middle East when the country was so diversely populated, and seeing everybody coming together. Not always, but some.
Do you think that played in your influence on wanting to move to California, or had you already had California on your mind?
It was my dark secret when I was really little. I don't know where it came from, but I just had this flash that I was going to end up in Southern California. It wasn't because I wanted to be an actress or work in the studios or any of that. And I think that was why I held it close to my heart, because it didn't make any sense. And it seemed weird, but I had certainty that this was going to happen. This is what nerdy smart kids do, right? I go to the library, so that's where you get this kind of information back then. And I got a map of Los Angeles, and I snuck it home, and I started studying it because I wanted to be prepared. I was like 10 years old. So imagine a little kid who has never seen Los Angeles except on TV, and you're studying this map. Whoa, there's tar pits in the middle of the city. What's that about? And a berry farm. What kind of place is this? This is wild. So I was really excited to finally get out here and see the tar pits. And tar pits are tar pits. It's crazy.
I've yet to go to those. I need to.
It's
I've
so
driven by 'em.
random. And the archaeology and, all that comes out of it. It's a worthy visit. It's not just touristy. It's really interesting that there are these tar pits in the middle of Los Angeles.
Los Angeles is a fascinating city. I think even outside the arts and entertainment. I mean,
Mhm.
I didn't realize how big aerospace was out here. Like it's huge.
Yes.
It's like
Yes.
gigantic.
Yes.
And then the tech, and then just there's so many,
Oh,
just the
absolutely.
amount of cultures that are all from all over the world in one place here. It's
And the
amazing.
Olympics are coming. The Olympics are coming.
Olympics, the World Cup is
Yep,
coming.
Yep.
Super Bowl, I think, too.
Yeah. So everything that is happening in Inglewood, if you haven't been down there to see SoFi Stadium and Cosm and all these other developments that are happening in the heart of our city, a lot of people only know Inglewood from, like the Dr. Dre song.
Yeah.
And it's worth a visit. It's nice.
I think that stadium got voted it won something globally. Like it was
It's amazing.
Yeah, it won some recognition. Like
Yeah.
it's one of the best in the world. They were saying.
Oh, absolutely. I'm
Yeah.
an architecture nerd, and it's really gorgeous. The structure, the roof floats over the underlying structure. They're not connected, which is not only related to beauty, but for earthquake safety.
What do you mean floats?
Well, it's not attached to the stadium itself, so that kind of umbrella kind of thing that goes over
Yeah.
it. It's not attached. So I mean, it's not floating in the air.
Right?
It's
It's like we're using like magnetic.
it's not a hover car. That would be very expensive. But no, it's not attached, and they designed it specifically so that, for any kind of earthquake situation, it would be safe. But also from a stylistic point of view, it's just beautiful.
All All right. And I've been telling you mentioned you like architecture. Have you seen The Brutalist yet?
No, you got me.
You're going to have to check that out. Not only
Okay.
from a life artist philosophical point of view, but if you're into architecture, the
Uh-huh.
only thing I will tell you is he is an architect in the
Okay.
movie.
That's good. Well, we're still supposed to break ground at Dreamore this year.
So yeah, that was one of my
Yeah.
the future.
Yes.
What are we building?
The future. We're building it now.
Yes.
So we're scaling up the recruiting and advisory firm. And, I'm also an LP and a member of the GP for a hedge fund. So I'm in crypto as well. So things have been predicted in certain ways for growth. There's been a lot of money that has been by the sidelines this last year or two in particular. So for anybody out there that was fundraising or laid off or just thought there's something wrong with them, there are people like me who've been around for 30 plus years, and it was the worst. You can math it. It was the worst, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with you. Just it's finally we're going to be back on track now. So yeah, we are very excited about our current slate of clients. We're taking on new clients. All referrals welcome. Anybody who is planning hiring has a certain pain point, they need, our kind of quality service, or just scaling for growth. The advisory, Davina Kanoi, that is running that department, she was doing this for another recruiting firm in the last cycle, and she seems like that quiet person in the corner that but she's like baby scorpion. She's so fierce and so knowledgeable to help companies be able to figure out we're at this point and we want to get to the next point, and we're all about sustainable growth. That's another thing that is very much who we are compared to the last time. That our specialty used to be rapid growth, and even back then, there were times that a company said, okay, we need to hire 30 people in the next few weeks. And I'm like, slow down a minute. Like, let's do something that is sustainable. Let's do our process. And so we're very much leaning into, we can't keep, doing the equivalent of, they plant the flowers, they rip out the flowers 2 weeks later, they plant different flowers. They keep just like churning that, and it's not sustainable. So sustainable growth is definitely in the real estate we're developing in the gardens. So it is both a metaphor and a real thing. But in business, we really want to work with employers that are going to be thoughtful about, how do you bring in people and, grow sustainably and not just churn and burn, or we're going to end up creating the same outcome that we did these last few years. It's been really painful. We can't keep doing this. Slow down a minute, do it better. Um, and then on the real estate side of things, we've always had physical space as part of our brand. And I'm so grateful that it was the happy accident back in the 90s when I lived on the Strand of Manhattan Beach. I felt so lucky to be in this feels like you're in vacation paradise area that I just wanted to share this home with everybody else. And we started having barbecues and parties. And then the tech community, like we ended up making placements just from people that met in those early days. And ever since then, we've always made it a point to have a physical space that we can live, work, and share. So the 10 acres at the top of Malibu, um, once you get up there, you're either a little bit car sick and we'll give you some water, or you immediately get there and see the sky and the ocean and the nature, and just you just feel calmer and feel better. And we've had so many events and we'll continue to do so, that have brought together founders, investors, creators, generate new ideas. You got to get out of your comfort zone and in a different environment for your brain to free up a little bit and, plan for the future. And so that's really what we're doing with these kinds of spaces, to help drive that level of innovation, healing, and growth in both business and on the personal side. So we are expanding the real estate portfolio. So those announcements are not ready yet, but soon, because we have other assets that we're looking at that will open up for capital investment and also just provide venues for the kind of businesses and people that we're nurturing.
I love it. And I remember on our first conversation, I remember we had talked about the benefit of going out in nature. Because when you're sitting in front of a computer all day, like you think, and even if you step away for a second, you think you're taking a break, but like you do have to go reset
Yeah,
and recharge,
absolutely.
after a while. And I got excited when you mentioned LP and GP
Hmm.
because
Like a record.
that's in Secret of Sand Hill Road. And I just want to make sure I understand. Please
Yes.
correct me. So those are they're the ones that invest to the venture capital company.
Yeah. So a limited partner, I put money in, and then they do the work.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
it's just friendly pressure, like do your job because I'm over here, and I'm a member of the GP of a associated fund. So I'm not an active GP. So a general partner would be taking on a role, and how, unless I didn't sleep at night, would I be doing all of these jobs I've already listed. So instead of being an active GP, I go in the garden and pull weeds. That's where that time goes.
Yeah, well,
I
that's what I
plant
meant earlier when
trees.
I was saying, when it comes to the LPs and the VCs and then the founders, it's like there's so many. It's like it's not corporate America at this, but it's kind of you're still in. There's a bunch of people you have to work through. It's not like just two people. We're just gonna go do this. Here's a big check. Go ahead and go do it. It's like no, there's many levels it seems,
Yeah,
and
and
rounds of investment and shareholders and all that stuff.
well, we were in a very serious boom cycle that would be a whole other podcast and a series of books to break down, what has been working and what is seriously broken. You may have noticed I am of the female persuasion when it comes to gender, and so there's been even a lot of rhetoric in the VC community about, so we're funding more women and we're funding more diversity, and the needles haven't really moved. I mean, there's been plenty of opportunity before everything, kind of ground to a halt and got complicated. And, a lot of female investors and diverse investors are attacking this problem in different ways. I can see that some are kind of angry, some are taking a route of, well, the only change comes from within. I'm taking a path that the VC model is only one way to get your startup to succeed. And it, in many ways, has been a, churn and burn kind of model. Also came out of film finance. I did 3 movies and got them, 3 for 3. But I won't tell you what movies they are because they're so buried deep in Netflix, and they're not masterworks. There is no Kubrick happening in the films that I produced. But what I did learn was that in those kinds of finance worlds, that's not always what it seems. And so I feel like there's a lot in the startup community that founders are going, ooh, I'm going to get funded and then I'm going to be able to see my dream. And it's like that financial system is not necessarily designed for you in the way that you think it is. So just let's draw an analogy between what I describe what we do in recruiting, that we're going to go and like, here's the whole universe and here's your choices. Here's your best choices. And so what I see often, or what I have seen, is that, founder has idea, founder has other founder friends, founder does accelerator, and then you're on this path and you're like, that's my path. That's how I become a unicorn, without ever taking a beat and going, does it make sense for you to be a unicorn? If you spent 6 to 9 months fundraising for no result, what could you have done instead with that time and energy to just get your company built? Have you gone to the bank? There's no shame in getting a loan. And you might think that, oh God, this SBA loan, it's going to be 9 or 11% interest rate. Well, that's cheap compared to somebody's going to give you $1 million and take half your company. So it's just good as we go into this next cycle. This is both formally and informally how we, advise founders, and with an emphasis on sustainable growth and a growth mindset. It's like, so like evaluate your options, recognize when some of these options might be, you just didn't know those existed, or there's some sort of like shame cycle going on because it feels embarrassing to like run up your credit cards to start your startup. I think it's great. You know what? The VCs were zerping for years. So zerp your own credit cards. And then, if you believe in yourself and a year later you pay everybody off and it's just you and the banks, Right
I,
on.
I agree. And actually, I don't know. Our first conversation we had, that's another big thing I took when you said to me, you're like, there's more than one way to do this. You're like, you don't have to
Absolutely.
get venture capital and get a bunch of, there's other ways to
Yeah,
go
I
about this.
mean,
So
you can marry rich. It's a choice.
yeah.
People do it all the time.
A lot of people have, yeah.
That was never my path. I don't know. What am I saying? I'm married for love. Silly me.
I better keep my mouth shut.
But why? I haven't.
There's a how do I? There's both male and female. There's probably there's a lot have benefited from that type of system out here in the Los Angeles, Orange County.
It's all good. I'm just saying they're choices. We don't always recognize them as choices, but they are absolutely
We
choices.
love each other. Trust me. I'm like, okay, all right. Yeah.
And somewhere in the, it's just you don't want to fail. And sometimes it's like if somebody's turning you down, if you're not getting funding this way, you're not getting, it also is a good litmus test for how good is your idea really. So
Or how bad do you want it?
how bad do you want it? And, every day is today. And going back to the everything is learning concept, if you're just going into a very specific kind of funding route and you got your pitch deck and you got your, KPIs and that is all good discipline. And I'm not at all invalidating all of that. It's just know that that's a very specific kind of system. And there are many, many, many entrepreneurial, what's the word? Journeys that
Avenues.
I mean, depending on who I'm talking to, I started my company in 1996, or I started my company in 2021, or, so there's a little bit of like, if you're an entrepreneur and you're going to have these ebbs and flows and you're going to adapt or pivot or all these kind of things, like, it's just part of it. And sometimes if you're just boxing it into the one thing, it was particularly brutal last year. So I'm just feeling like there could be a lot of founders that are going to just have to do something differently because that system, it was the worst time ever to try to buy into a system that you might not have been in, should have been in anyway. So good news. Go a different route.
I love it.
I think there's also going to be a lot more M&A activity. That's
M&A, what does M&A mean?
Mergers and acquisitions. So that's one of the other portions of our advisory that we offer is we do post-merger integration, specifically the people aspects. When a company gets acquired and going through that M&A merger and acquisition process, there's all the due diligence around, what do your financial statements look like, your revenues, your liabilities, your capital assets, all this kind of stuff that's really important. How are your operations? Where's the low-hanging fruit that we can just streamline some things so when the acquisition is done, we're going to get more value out of this deal. There are definitely consulting firms that do the HR side of this post-merger integration work. Not all of them come from a recruiting background where we have for decades seen, so founder launches company, successful exit gets acquired, woohoo. And then, there's that, you got to stay there phase. But a lot of times, especially if Google's buying you, it's like they're just a lot of times just like, I'm going to buy you so I can shelve this. And then that's the despair and demotivation phase for many that are acquired, right? So now there's these people. And, AOL Time Warner is my favorite M&A story because anybody from back in the day knew that when these two companies merged and we're all going to make billions of dollars, and the two cultures were as different as Mars and Venus, and everybody lost their shorts, right? And so much of that was related to like, you can't just put these two things together and not account for, who are the people and what's the culture and how is this going to come together. So that's a lot of the kind of work that, we're really looking to continue to scale up in our business because we have a founder success tool. How are you actually motivated? How can we work in a post-merger world that you have these people that are going to sit there on your payroll and count the day till they can be gone? And meanwhile, they have all of this intellectual capital and they were in a startup. They're super motivated and now they're super demotivated. So how can we, work on something that is going to increase the value for the company So you're not just throwing that money away on these people. And also, these are people, right? I don't think anybody actually wants to wake up and not be motivated. It just happens all the time. And so if you can create something that can, feed that motivation monster again, that's real powerful.
That was fantastic.
Yeah, it's good stuff.
Eric, did you have anything?
Yeah, I got a question about your assessment test. Let's say you have like a band. Like what's that band that sings "Don't Stop Believing"?
Journey.
That's it. That was my question. Thank you.
Did I just get rickrolled?
I'm not sure what that means.
Oh wait, you intentionally did that on purpose.
Yeah. I don't even have a question. I'm gonna walk away.
That was perfect.
Did we make it to 10? Because if we're not to 10 journeys yet, I'm going to go journey, and then this is a Beetlejuice.
I think we're well over 10.
Okay.
Yeah.
I actually am going to go look up synonyms for journey after this.
Well, what I'm hoping is that, we need to like go viral, and it's like a drinking game. So it's a journey drinking game.
I actually, now that I'm just curious.
I don't know why that voice, but it's just the voice that happens.
So watch this, and every time we say journey, you gotta take a big chug.
Yes. Or a small one.
Here we go.
As you wish.
Trip, expedition, period of traveling, tour,
Sojourn. Yeah.
trek,
Yep.
voyage, cruise, safari, ride.
Meander. Oh, can we just
Make one's way,
wander?
sail, hike. So yeah, there's other words we could have maybe, but
just let the AI do its magic. Just
but
replace it out.
But back to the movie, The Brutalist.
Yes,
I'm not going to give it anything. I cannot give it away to you, but you will be pondering Journey. I will say that.
I am excited for this.
I'm real curious.
Band? Should be the band?
No. Just
so
Journey and I'll just say this. We all think it's the journey, not the destination. You leave that movie questioning that. That's all I've said.
You leave that. So when you leave the movie, so you take a journey after the movie.
You definitely take a journey.
Okay, yeah, because that's the only way that you could get away from the movie.
Well, there's actually an intermission in this one. There's an actual intermission. It's 3.5 hours long, so they give you a 15-minute
that
intermission.
Is a journey.
Yeah, it's a commitment. It's a several-hour commitment.
This is in a real theater and everything.
Oh yeah, you got to go see it in a real theater.
Okay. Wow.
And Adrian Brody, there's a great chance a bunch of them are probably winning an Oscar out of it.
Right on. Okay, cool. Yeah,
it might be a nice
The Brutalist.
Yeah, The Brutalist. But is there anything else that you wanted to talk about in particular? Anything else that this has been? I could talk to you for 5 hours.
This is what happens. I have been the queen of the 9-minute podcast that goes on for 25 minutes, and then we're like, I guess we need to call it.
Oh, I mean, we can keep going.
Sometimes my answers are long. That's why you edit. Give you more, not less. It is Dreamore.
We're gonna let the. I'm just curious. What do you think was happening with the film industry? What do you think the future of that is? Just because you've dabbled in.
Opinions are like assholes.
Okay.
I'll give you a little bit of what I'm seeing, which is a bit of the, good question, Sam. Good question. Who'd have thunk, but it's just been the nature of things that we would have all these tech industry layoffs. At the same time, there were all these entertainment industry strikes. And, yes, absolutely. AI has been a factor in, what's going to happen after this. I have dear, dear friends that are amazing and powerful and talented. And I don't even know how to coach them in terms of how they would adapt what they do. Anything from editors to post-production types to, artists and writers and all these kinds of things. That's not a very pithy, I wish I had we're all gonna drink. But yeah, it's another system that is breaking, and venture capital, some say, oh, well, that's breaking. And yeah, but yes, but it's also money people. And if I can just gloss that over, I guess I'm kind of a money person in some ways. And it's like, oh yeah, we always figure it out because we get our little imaginary spreadsheets out and, come up with a new system, and then that one works now. But so many people that are affected in the entertainment industry. I mean, you've got the big corporate blah, 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 and streaming did not work as a business model. It's a real problem, and they haven't been able to quite figure this out in a way that makes sense. So
So like Netflix and all of them.
yeah, I mean, it's, we had a studio system, and I'm not saying that that was perfect, and we had the studio system before where they owned the talent. And, so that model, again, these are highly flawed systems, but if you're just looking at it through the lens of business and finance, let's put the other part aside because we don't want to talk about the misogyny and the blah, blah, blah. But, those models did work. And then, you've got some great films out of these different models. And so I think for a minute, with streaming, they just hadn't figured out how to make it work. And then it just has gone further and further down that way. I mean, if I was a creator, I think I would have just launched a YouTube channel 10 years ago and tried to not turn into an asshole, which seems to happen a lot with people that are YouTube creators for too long. Yeah, I think a lot of people are trying to figure this out, but I'm frankly very worried for some friends. Meanwhile, though, I think this is a very LA problem. LA's gotten so expensive and the system is still so dysfunctional and whatnot. But meanwhile, I have very dear friends that are in Australia. There are credits there. You can make $1 million worth of movie for $400,000. So they're putting together a $1.2 million slate so they can make 3 movies. Is that right? It's like math. Um, and already have distribution baked in, and it's kind of hard to lose money on a deal that's that cheap, and they've got all of the talent and the editing, and they can even do certain things with other global people because you can distribute it in certain ways via the internet. So and I have other friends that are in New Mexico now, and he's kind of doing just like PA production work, but he's busier than can be, and they don't have enough people to supply what they need on those production sets right now.
Well, and that's what we've been talking on this podcast, and not to go too political with everything, but is that because of the tax incentives that people are leaving and going these other places because they
I mean, that's always been a factor. When I produce my horrible little films that I won't tell you what they are, and you'd have to dive really deep on Netflix, that was in the era where there were all these tax credits and film credits in Europe. And a little bit in Canada. And so everything that we were producing as a slate, doing urban films that were very much, coming out of Barbershop and, you know, Clerks and other films like that. But it was all going to be related to European tax credits in Germany and countries like that.
Because I think the government here needs to increase the tax credits so people can stay here and people can have jobs here. I mean, it's still Hollywood, and like
It's still Hollywood. Yeah, something's got to change. I don't know how or when. I mean,
yeah.
we've got some things happening right now, like a lot of grant programs just got killed, and one of my friends, like today, she's like, "Oh wow, I've been working on this thing that my schedule just freed up because they just killed the whole grant program that I was working on."
Is she in the art industry or something else?
She's tech and
Gotcha.
another nonprofity kind of thing, and so yeah, so that happened.
Jeez.
I know, and that's when, like, if it's real, right? It's like when you look out and you go, "Oh, okay, well, you know, that home is gone." Like, wow, and your brain kind of does this, like, it goes into that instant denial for a minute, and then it kind of sinks in. So it does seem like a lot of us are in this kind of trauma phase with a lot of these dynamics. Like, wait, did that just is there really there's like not SNAP for people? How are people going to get food if they can't afford food? I still can't quite process these things. So yeah, I have one of my dearest friends who loves her home so much, and she was just talking about, well, maybe I've always said that I should live somewhere else for a bit. Maybe I'll just like rent this for a year and then just move, then come back. And I've already had so many friends. Some of them live in Wisconsin and outside Chicago and out of the country. And so this is the reality of these things. But there's those of us that love LA so much, and we're all kind of like Can we just fix it?
We don't want the party to end.
Yeah, I don't want to leave this. God,
That's
the
how I
podcast.
feel.
Okay, so we started this talking about my house is burned twice, and it was like cheerful. And now it's like, what are you going to do about the entertainment industry? I don't know. I can't fix it. I love movies. Please don't stop making movies.
And maybe, I mean, not comparing the two at all, but maybe this is, gosh, a journey of like we adapt and we figure it out. Like we figure out what we need to do. And if there's enough of us here in LA, which I believe there is, that aren't going to leave here, regardless of what happens, like, hey, we still love it here. We love our community here. How do we make this work? How can we make this the best place that it can be?
100%. I mean, there's another group of people that I'm working with right now, and it's too soon to talk about, except that I get really excited about, immersive, and we are Hollywood. This was part of the conversation with my partners earlier that, Hollywood and California beaches, nobody else has that, and it has a mystique that I don't think that's going to go out of style anytime in the near future. So how do we figure out how to harness this? And some of the things that are happening with live or streaming entertainment and immersive and, events and those kinds of things, maybe there's a possibility, a lot of creative people, you just want to create. And a lot of times you want to be on set making a movie or a TV commercial or anything in between because you like set energy. Like it's fun to be around the physicality of all this stuff and the energy of having people coming together to, have some creative output. So maybe there's a way to harness that, isn't exactly, here's a scripted, 3.5 hour movie that you're going to, produce in downtown and it's expensive. Maybe it's more from an events and an immersive point of view. There's a theater that we saw that, like the Netflix comedy specials, right? It is an example where you have a live event and, but then you have this other content that goes hello, microphone, that goes way beyond and can monetize in a way that makes sense. So if we can come up with these kinds of ideas and we want community, I mean, maybe there's opportunities to have events that are in place but still can, stream. Like another one of my friends is running innovation for Tony Robbins, which is really freaking cool. And he shows me videos of when they all come together and there's all these people there physically. And then there's all these people on the screens and all together in these events that are just, making a difference. And so I don't know, maybe if we're not making movies, we're generating other creative output that still keeps us employed and excited to be here.
That's a great point. I went to a immersive theater earlier, when was that? Before the holidays, and it was incredible. And that's what made me realize, like, oh yeah, you can't, I guess maybe one day there'll be holograms and things like that. but for right now, it's people. AI cannot do that. Like what I just experienced in the improvness of it. And like, you're getting pulled into rooms and you're part of the show
well,
too.
actually AI is very much part of that. And this is another example where AI is going from the creative standpoint with the Gen AI, that a lot of this immersive is very AI driven and it's just super exciting.
How so? How is it like?
Well, say that you have like I've made interactive gardens that were nature, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you can go here and play piano, you can do all these things. So say you have a technology integrated with that you're going to go through an interactive garden and then, it's going to be able to have some biometrics and go like, oh, hey, Sam, like, and you had enough information that it's going to be like, oh, I'm going to make these flowers blue because I know you're into blue.
Okay,
and just like give you this, like stimulus response kind of thing that feels like magic. And yet it's just enough artificial intelligence to read you and have a sense of you. There's biometric things that can interact where maybe it senses like, you've got facial expressions or you have breathing patterns that you seem to be kind of anxious. And so it can, release a scent or make sure that the music is, something that's going to counteract how it's sensing to help you and improve your wellness.
So that's a way where it's a good thing, like
Yeah.
aiding and enhancing the experience.
There is so
Okay,
much
that makes
happening.
sense. That makes sense. Yeah.
We have a mental health crisis that has been going on for a while and doesn't seem to be improving. And so there is a possibility that the same technology that is destroying us can also restore us. So there's a lot that I'm seeing in health and wellness and innovation that is not only on the consumer product side of things, although that's a cool subject. Mocktails are the new cocktails. And we have a Kava Body IQ sponsor with these Kava drinks that are so, it's like I never want to drink a Diet Coke again because like I can get my sparkly and then you almost don't feel anything, but it will knock you down like 5%. It's great and it's delicious. But on the technology side of things, when you're dealing with biometrics and breathing and, even conversational, they've shown that can help. If you do therapy with artificial intelligence, it still gives you a bit of a mental health lift. It's kind of wild. How do you feel about that?
Good.
See?
Fantastic.
Just want you to know. I just want to validate your feelings. Your feelings are your feelings.
Well,
Are you saying they are what they are?
They
They
are
is what they is.
are what they are, but it's AIRE. They are what they are.
You just made me think like we've created the disease and now are developing the cure at the same time with the technology.
It's the thing about how beer is the source of and the solutions to all of life's problems. That's AI, basically.
Oh my gosh. Well, I could. There's so many other questions I could ask you. So
do it again someday if you want. We should have a year from now. What happened a year from now?
If you're open to it,
I think it's a great idea.
We could do it on location at your spot in
That
Malibu.
is an even better idea.
Yeah.
Yes.
With the ocean in the background.
Right.
I don't know. I kind of like her having to take that big traffic drive.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Sitting in traffic for an hour and a half.
I mean,
thank you for making the drive, by the way.
If there was, again, it's just all these little tests where you're like, right on, you're doing good. Because I've lived in LA since 1989, and I have driven all over this town, mostly in convertibles. I have never experienced freeway traffic like that.
Just now?
If I did, I blanked it from my memory decades ago. And I'm just like, I'm strangely calm. Because I've been saying, what can they do to me after they burn my house down? That was my little, and then it happens again. And I'm like, now it's too many words. What can they do to me? It's fine.
It's like that meme. Everything's fine. Everything's fine.
Oh my God. That was very much after with the dog and the coffee cup and the fire. Yeah, that was
fine.
I was that dog for, especially that first COVID year. I was 100% that dog. Yeah. Good times though. I'm glad we're ending it on a cheery note because that is also a very powerful tool in general. I learned this from my Cirque instructor. I do aerial training and now she's Cirque du Soleil and I'm super proud of her. But the whole thing that athletes do with visualization and, you do it in business too. But I hadn't been trained that you visualize a thing. And when you're doing a really difficult sport like aerial, you can't learn as you go because you're going to be exhausted before you ever figure it out. So you literally you're going to bed and then you're just like working through the routines in your mind. And then you get up the next day and you go do it. And it feels like magic. But even that imprinting in this part of your brain is informing your muscles and everything else. So the visualization in times of trauma, I'm going to talk out of both sides of my mouth. You need to live in the now. Just be in the present moment. There's no future. There's no past. No back. But at the same time, visualizing is really useful because, I was up there and it was apocalyptic and the land was just like burned bare. But because everything was so bare, that, there was this, I've got a white canvas and now I can imagine, the colorful painting on it because it's just that blankness is making it easier for me to go, ooh, I have these architectural drawings. And now because there's nothing in the way of it anymore, I can see the house. I can see the garden. The Malibu Dream House, that is absolutely what happened. That we got this place back in 2010. It was 3.5 acres by the ocean and a big field behind this old white house that was just full of weeds and snakes. Like a hawk came down while I was standing there and just like pulled a rattlesnake out of the field and flew away. Wow, okay, Malibu Dream House. And it was a joke. It was like, oh, Malibu Dream House. But I did see in a flash this garden and, events and the clients and business people and all of that. And then over the next 7 or 8 years, little by little, we were building that. And by the time it was all done, it was very satisfying to go, oh yeah, that was that flash that I saw, that visualization. And then you just work at it. And if there's ever advice for any founder, like, recognize those flashes and then know that it's all that incremental stuff along the way. And your journey is never linear, but you'll get there if you keep trying.
That was beautiful. Well, Annemarie, thank you so much for coming, and very sorry for everything you have been through. Because it's not good stuff. Like it's traumatic. So I admire your resiliency, and everyone else that's going through have been affected by this. And I appreciate you coming here tonight and
100%.
opening up with us. And yeah, you're amazing to talk to. When I first met you and told, I'm like, oh gosh, we could it's not going to be what to talk about. It's like, what direction do you decide to go?
Yeah,
right?
no, it's
like,
good.
Yeah.
You do a great job. And
Thank you.
genuinely wanting to be in this kind of format and share with a broader audience. If I can do this, anybody can. That it's so much the messaging and why we call it Dreamore in all directions. So whoever's struggling and wanting to give up, I just want to make sure that you can do it.
Great. And I'll give you the last word. Eric, do you have any final thoughts?
No, I'm good. Thank you for coming on.
I thought he might say journey for a second, but I don't know.
Good. I want you to think that.
Now I'm thinking
I
of
want you to think
I think there was
that.
a shoe store called Journeys that used to be in the
Oh
mall.
yeah, I got my first pair of Doc Martens from there. Yeah.
I still have my 90s Doc Martens. I got to bring those out someday. I'm kind of afraid to wear them like.
Are they boot, like high tops?
Oh yeah, they're the classic, with the yellow and the boot. Yeah.
Black
the
or brown?
Yeah,
Yeah,
the black.
okay.
Yeah, and if I go certain areas where they want to polish them, like, no, these are my 90s scuffs. Great shoes, though.
Yeah, well, that could be a whole other topic right there.
If you keep saying that, we'll keep going.
Yeah, that's true. Before I give you the last word, where, again, can people visit your company website? Where can people find you? Where are all the places people can go?
So Dreamore's website is dreamore.io. That's spelled DREAMORE.io. There's an Easter egg in it, amore. That's why it's one M instead of two. And amore, of course, means love. You can also find me on LinkedIn. I post content there regularly. So it's linkedin.com/IN/Annemarie. And that's spelled ANNEMARIE. And you can try to connect with me on Facebook, but I can't figure out which way that's going. So we're just going to pretend I didn't say that. But I am there too.
That's some good LinkedIn real estate right there that you claimed that just that name right there.
I was in one of the early adopters.
I was going to say.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, transparency is the new secrecy. I want to share these thoughts and, business insights freely because it's important work for women, for founders, for creators, and just human beings. So if you're a human being, let's be friends.
I love it. Well, Annemarie, you gave us so much tonight. Thank you so much again for coming on. I always give the guests the last word. It can be as much or as little as you want, deep or as shallow. The floor is yours.
One word?
Oh, I'm sorry. I should have been more specific. Note for future times when I... last word as in just, you can end this however you want. It can be one word if you want, or it can be a full-on soliloquy or monologue.
It's not failure, it's learning. Be the phoenix.
Annemarie, thank you so much. I love it.
You're welcome. Bye.
Hi, everyone. Sam Dever, the Sam Dever Podcast here, and I just want to thank you for checking out this episode. To watch and listen to future episodes, be sure to follow us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, and subscribe to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/@the Sam Dever Podcast. Thank you so much. See you soon.